My name's Gary Taylor. I'm on the board of trustees for PSC Support. It's not that I'm blagging this talk today, but I've not put notes down on the purpose of talking about it, just quite frankly and quite straight up. The contents of this talk really, so I'm going to cover my story. The last 11 years, I was diagnosed in 2008 with autoimmune hepatitis with a PSC overlap. I'll come into some more detail about that. Then I'm going to kind of flip forward to the lead up to the transplant and my kind of last cholangitis attack before I was recommended to go on the waiting list. Go into some detail about what you can expect on an assessment day, and then the call about getting listed. Finally, then the call when I got that on the evening, the transplant itself, and then the kind of road to recovery, and really where I am today. And it's been an eventful kind of 11 years really. So this was me in a spring chicken of 24, 25 years old. And so it was on the 1st of November 2008 that I got admitted to hospital. And actually with a very kind of acute reaction. I was jaundiced. I'd been at the British TV Awards the week before, and I'd started getting kind of lots of acid and wasn't feeling very well. And you know, as a kind of mid-20-year-old who liked to go out and have a few drinks and curries and all sorts, I didn't think anything of it. But it kind of got worse. And when I went to have my bloods taken, my bilirubin was over 200, which I think, what's the 21? So 10 times what it should be. I think my ALT and ALP were in the thousands, so they, you know, my liver markers were kind of through the roof. And it was a time when it was the old Selly Oak Hospital. I don't know how many of you are from Birmingham or around here, but probably wasn't the most pleasant of places, and we are kind of blessed to have the new QE now. The doctors at the time, they didn't really know what it was. I spent best part of 2 months in hospital from the 1st of November 2008 to the 22nd of December. And very much a kind of test and learn process, huge amounts of tests, so liver biopsies, blood tests, of course, colonoscopies, the flexible sigmoidoscopy, which is a much lower down version of the colonoscopy. And you know, finally it was confirmed that it was autoimmune hepatitis with this PSC overlap. Moving forward kind of a few years, it was confirmed that it was more PSC than autoimmune hepatitis. I've been very fortunate that I've had James and Palak as my consultants throughout the last kind of decade, and you know, kind of blessed with the QE that you know, is this kind of specialist centre. But really moving forward, I mean, it's funny when I'll show kind of before or after, but some of you may have heard this before. Oh, you're looking so well, and you know, it's lies, all lies. So this was me kind of 3 years ago. I'm the good-looking gentleman on the right here. This was me only a few weeks ago, actually. It was a good day. But you can kind of see over the last 11 years, 40,000 tablets I've kind of worked out is roughly how many I've taken in that time. 7 colonoscopies, 5 liver biopsies, 4 MRIs, 3 fibre scans, and 1 liver transplant later. So it's a massive improvement, you know, just in this last kind of 3 or 4 years, and you know, I was jaundiced for a long period. And actually, James mentioned it about the kind of bilirubin markers, that the more cholangitis attacks I had in the kind of final 18 months, I was hospitalised kind of 4 or 5 times in that last 18 months, the higher my bilirubin level stayed, and that was kind of a big indicator, really, wasn't it, for making the recommendation to go on the assessment day. Because my mum's here, actually, she's flown over from Singapore. I thought I'd, because I'm showing lots of pictures of myself. This was one of me when I was younger as well. You can tell where my son gets his fat face from. I think I've still got those shorts, actually. So, yeah, the lead up to it, I mean, it was, I think, probably relatively uneventful, the kind of first, I don't know, 6 or 7 years of it. A lot of maintenance, a lot of coming into the hospital, having blood tests. I had a few ups and downs, but actually I was quite fortunate that I reacted quite well to steroid treatment, and that kept me on prednisolone. I was on a high dose of that for quite a long time, and it did keep my kind of blood tests all under control, which was good. In the kind of 2015-2016 period, like I said, I had kind of 4 or 5 periods of hospitalisation. mainly cholangitis attacks, but it wasn't until the September of 2016 when I'd actually come for what was, I thought, a relatively routine checkup, and it was actually Palak who said to me, you're not well. I'm going to admit you tonight. And you did, huh? And I don't know what my bilirubin was at the time, maybe over 100 or something like that. I think it was not as bad as it had been kind of historically, but it was clear that I wasn't well. I was still jaundiced, etc. And so I ended up being in hospital for probably 3 or 4 weeks that time. And during that period, probably about 3 weeks, probably the first week or so, I did actually kind of go downhill a bit. James had been to see me on ward, other consultants as well. I'd got kind of onset of varices, which is the expanding of the spleen that does that. So I'd had an endoscopy to have a look at that. I'd had blood in my stools, sort of active kind of colitis, and all, relatively worrying kind of things. And it was actually James who said to me, it's now probably is the time we need to consider, getting a transplant. So moving on to the assessment day, I've actually bought my book with me. I've kept it all. So if anybody does want to, during the break, have a flick through, I've actually got a lot of the documentation here from the assessment day, which I kept. So please do kind of have a flick through. Just as a show of hands, is there anyone on the waiting list at the moment? I'm waiting for a transplant at all? No? Oh, one over there, okay. And we've got probably, 4, 5, 6 in the room that have actually had transplants now. I can see all the blue. Oh, blue. Oh, yeah. Mum actually gave me the wrong colour earlier, as if I'd forgotten my transplant. So this is the assessment centre here in Birmingham. And kind of what to expect on the day. There's a number of things. So first of all was a meeting with the transplant nurse and transplant coordinators. They kind of give you a briefing over kind of what to expect during the waiting period and during the assessment day as well. Then there's the kind of standard health checks, and James quite rightly mentioned that you can actually be too ill for a transplant. But also this, and strange enough, you mentioned the Christmas feeding. Mine was actually Christmas feeding. I was 73 kilos on the day, and the dietitian had asked me to get up to around 80 kilos. Which is not a bad weight for kind of my height and frame, but on the expectation that during that period after the transplant you do lose weight, and it's feeding you up is the right word for it. They took an echo of my heart to check that your heart's stable enough and healthy enough, breathing tests, various other blood tests as well, all to make sure that you are fit enough to have this quite significant operation. After that period, there was a transplantee, post-transplantee talk. Someone had already had a transplant, going through similar to what I'm kind of saying to you today, the kind of things to what to expect. And then you get to meet surgeons, other hepatologists and consultants, and also some of the team that will be performing the operation. I didn't actually meet my surgeon on that day. It was another one. And actually, during the day, sometimes it can be a 2 or 3 day or 2 or 3 days for the assessment. But because I'd been in hospital so shortly before, I'd already had quite a lot of the tests prior to the assessment day. So I actually only had mine over 1 day. So once the assessment day is done, in Birmingham, it's the decisions are usually made by the multidisciplinary team on a Thursday, I believe. Is that correct? It's Friday now. And I got the call. So it was, I think, kind of November the 4th, I think it was the first Friday in November, and got a call from the transplant coordinator, who's just walked in, to say, look, you've kind of qualified. That sounds like a really strange word. But there is a scoring system. It's called the UKELD score, which is the UK model for end-stage liver disease. And the minimum score is 49. I think I went through on kind of 53 or 54, which means then you're kind of ready to have a transplant. Next one. There we go. Oh, surprise, surprise. So, again, James has touched on the kind of listing process and kind of what to expect. And I was told very similar, probably 4 to 6 months wait. In the end, I actually ended waiting 9 weeks. So I kind of flew through. And during this period, there is, a sense of uncertainty. One of the things to expect is also that call could come at any point, day, night, weekday, weekend. So you are told to have a bag packed, be ready and stay kind of within an hour of the hospital. I work away quite a lot, so I had to make quite a dramatic change on my day-to-day. I was going to do a lot of travelling, so staying within the Midlands area, which could have been for months, could have been for a year, could have been longer. I've got a friend who waited 18 months for his transplant. It can affect your life in that way. I think I've been very, very fortunate that mine happened so quickly after. Managed to get through Christmas, and it was on the 10th of January that I actually got the call, as if by magic. I didn't actually have "It's the hospital" in my phone. It did. I think it's just saved as the Queen Elizabeth. But, it was a really surreal experience. We just had dinner at home, and it's amazing how things. I'm a big believer in karma, and my sister-in-law was actually round. So I've got two children. I've got a 12-year-old and a 3-year-old, soon to be 4. And she was round for dinner. We just had dinner. We'd sat down in front of the TV. It was about 7:30 at night, and the phone went. And as soon as I saw the call, I thought, right, I know what this is. The transplant coordinator said, look, obviously, we know why we're calling you. I said, yes. He said, are you ready? I said, yes. Got the bag. He said, can you be within the hour? Now, interesting enough, again, kind of referring back to what James was saying, is that although it feels like a bit of a mad rush in terms of like, oh my God, I've got an hour, I've got to get there, and I'm going to be on the operating table, and that's it. It wasn't actually for 12 hours that I actually had the transplant. So where they go in, they give you a kind of final assessment, told me to relax, go to bed, which is the most bizarre experience. And then on the morning of the call, this is actually a genuine picture there. It was 11th of January, 7:51, 9 minutes before going in. I've put this here because these are the kind of infamous green compression socks that they make you put on. And it's really bizarre because they come in and they said to me, look, it's about 6:30 in the morning. I'd woken up and they said to me, look, it's probably going to be around 8 o'clock. We're kind of doing the final preparations. Here's your green socks. Here's your overall. Don't wear any pants. And then you kind of sit there and wait, and it's just this bizarre kind of waiting period of an hour. And the realistic prospect is even up to that kind of last 15 minutes beforehand, it could still get cancelled. I know Adrian, who's in the room, you had a couple of cancellations, didn't you, Aid? Third cancellation. So, and again, I class myself as very lucky, not to have to go through that experience of getting to the final stage, then being told, actually, it's cancelled, and come back again in another month. So, the point of them coming up then at 8 o'clock, and it wasn't near enough bang on, actually. They take you down to theatre. We did a final kind of signature on a form, and then they take you into the anaesthetist room. And having ulcerative colitis, just bad bowels in general, having to get up at 6:30 in the morning and sit on a trolley for an hour is not great. And I remember getting down into the theatre and thinking, oh my God, I need to go to the toilet. And the anaesthetist said to me, don't worry, put the thing in. And I could just feel the cold of the anaesthetic going up, and then that was it, gone. So 2 days in ICU. My transplant was 9.5 hours in total. I actually had a split transplant. So it was a very healthy liver, I was told. And they took, I don't know what the percentage was, but we'll call it 70% of that liver and gave it to me. And then the other kind of 30% went to a 2-month-old baby in the children's unit across the way. So absolutely incredible, and both doing fine, which is fabulous. So the recovery period, so this is me in ICU, out for the count. And I was in there until the Friday afternoon. They took me up onto the ward in this picture here, Friday evening. I don't remember really being in ICU. I kind of remember, it's a bit like a dream of them taking the breathing tube out, and it kind of woke me, but then the rest is just a blur. And it wasn't really until Saturday morning that I can remember them being awake and kind of being conscious of where I was. And they don't hold prisoners. They try and get you up and active as soon as possible, and get you walking around and doing things. I think after the second day, so the Sunday, they were trying to get me up and out of bed, which wasn't particularly nice. But again, I think I was pretty textbook. I mean, they usually say 7 to 10 days in hospital. I was out in 9, so it is quite a quick period. Around 3 weeks after you're kind of released, you'll have your staples out. So I had the standard, they call that the Lexus scar, which is the L, but you can have the Mercedes scar, which is then like this. Back home in 9 days, and you can just see the difference. It's absolutely incredible. And really, as soon as that new liver is in place, it's already starting to flush out the bilirubin and making you feel better. And within literally 2 or 3 days, my colour had returned. It's incredible. After that, you go on to a kind of surgical track of monitoring on a weekly basis. There were 12 weekly sessions, and I'd come into the QE, see the surgeons, take bloods. I've also got my substantial amount of tablets with me today. So you'd expect to receive one of these lovely little blue tablet holders, which has all of my tablets by day. And so if you want to look at those, you can, show and tell. And it's interesting that there is a real balancing act with the medication. I started on probably 4.5 milligrams of tacrolimus, which is the anti-rejection drug, twice a day. I'm now down to 1.5. I've cut my amount of MMF in half as well, and slowly reducing off a lot of the medication, which is fabulous. You are on these medications for life. That's not going to change. And the importance of going in regularly and having your blood tests after transplant to make sure that you've got the right levels of medication is ultra important. And it can be daunting. I mean, there must be 20-odd tablets a day that we're taking. And that can vary from person to person. But it's just being mindful that, making sure you're taking your tablets at the right time, keeping yourself healthy, it's a common sense approach to treatment, right? So today, kind of 2.5 years on, and I've put these in for some, my wife and I like to go away on holiday. I like to do fancy dress, and no one should be ashamed of showing their scar after a transplant. We do a lot of clay pigeon shooting. What's that? The shark bite. Thanks, Mum. I like to do a lot of shooting, which, for the year and a half after the transplant, I couldn't do, just because I couldn't pick up the gun. So that was, a nice big change. And so just your whole outlook on life does change, and you have the ability to do the things that, whilst I was, poorly, you just couldn't do. My son had, we seem to run in the family with weird conditions, but my son had sepsis when he was about a year old. He's actually got a huge scar on his leg from where they had several operations. We have scar battles. We call it Scar Wars, and he likes it. But at the time, when he was admitted to hospital, I still had my staples in, and I couldn't even pick him up. So now, we're out and about all the time having fun. It's fabulous. And a real kind of positive story from all of this is a handful of us have a kind of separate WhatsApp group, some friends. Aide's in the room today, but Tom and Nathan, we all had our transplants. Well, myself, Adrian, Tom, and then Andy, who's not actually in this picture, all had our transplants within the same month. It was a miracle. We've all had PSC and various other conditions for many, many years, all of differing ages and lifestyles and all sorts. And this just kind of shows how much of a difference kind of transplantation can make to your life. And it's not something to be afraid of. It is a very positive step forward. Yes, there will always be, and these are my words of wisdom here, there will be lows, but the highs far outweigh them. And hopefully, I'm kind of testament to that. There will be a lot of uncertainty, and there's nothing wrong with that. There always is with any kind of condition, even pre-transplant. But you should be strong enough to ask. So we have fabulous consultants across the country, and nurses and doctors, again, like James was saying, if you don't feel you're getting the right answers, you need to press your doctors, you need to press your consultants, and and if you're not getting that answer, then do change. It is a long road to recovery, and it feels like forever afterwards. But now looking back on it, it was a kind of it did fly by. From start to finish, so from the 11th of January to I went back to work in the last week of April, so kind of 13, 14 weeks later. I probably could have gone back beforehand, but I like to think again. I think I'm relatively lucky in that the recovery was quite quick. I know some people have had kind of issues afterwards, and people have bouts of reoccurrence, and so on and so forth. But and you will feel alone, but you're absolutely not. This is why we have PSC Support and the charity. This is why we have kind of fabulous doctors and consultants that support the charity as well. And why we put on days like this. So don't feel alone. That's why we're here. Please feel free to ask any question you want. I've basically got no shame anymore. We're more than happy to answer it. Thank you.